Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to SIKH Channel Community Talks. I'm very pleased today to be joined by a special guest from Canada in the Canadian Armed Forces, Major Sarabjot Singh Anand. Sarabjot is a project manager for the next generation of data centers, search and rescue network, and electronic flight bags for the Royal Canadian Air Force, a high-tech role in the armed forces. So without further ado, let's welcome Sarabjot Singh Anand. Sarabjot, welcome to SIKH Channel Community Talks.
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह.
Sarabjot, perhaps we can start briefly with your background, your childhood, perhaps your family history. For example, is there a history of military service in your family? And if you can take us back one or two generations of the Anand family.
Absolutely. So, born and raised in India. So we are from Punjab, Chandigarh. The family was. That's where we originated. I immigrated to Canada at the age of 12, but from a family background point of view, my grandfather was in the Indian Air Force serving as a warrant officer. So he had a military career there. He always wanted someone from the Indian to join the military. So I think I made his dream come true when I joined the Canadian Armed Forces. So he was talking about my grandfather's career, Sardar Sampuran Singh. He was a radar technician in the Indian Air Force. And little did I know when I was going to join the Canadian Armed Forces, I'm going to work in the communications branch as well, who look after radars, IT equipment, classified networks for the Royal Canadian Air Force and the Canadian Armed Forces.
That's absolutely tremendous. So you're carrying on a family legacy, a family history of services to the armed forces and in a very specialist field. But that field has changed a lot since your grandfather did this role. It's changed so much. Has it got any of the same elements still in the job or not?
Yeah, I would definitely. It's got warfare hasn't changed significantly. You still need command and control over your air assets, your ground troops, your naval assets. So the communications is essential. It was essential during the World Wars. It was essential during any of the Indian military activities. It's still essential now when taught the Western warfare or the Canadian Armed Forces, the role we play. But yes, technology has changed. I'll take my example, some of my posting that I did with the Canadian Armed Forces or Royal Canadian Air Force. I introduced electronic flight bags to digitize our Air Force and introduce tablets and iPads as part of the processes for the air crew and the pilots to be able to use them during operations. So yeah, we didn't have ads back in the days, so technology is advancing and we're integrating that. But the traditional IT communications is still there.
And you've achieved the status of major, which is a senior military position in any of the armed forces, in the Air Force. How difficult was that journey for you to become a major?
So, a great question. I'll backtrack a bit about my journey in the Canadian Armed Forces, how to where I am today. So I enrolled in 2011, and just how in India there's a NDA, National Defense Academy, we have something similar here called RMC, Royal Military College of Canada. I joined in 2011. I graduated in 2015 with a bachelor's of computer science from the college, and that's where my journey really started. And I kind of want to put a diversity and inclusion lens to this. So the college was founded in Canada was founded in 1867. College was founded in 1876. And it just happened so in 2015, I was the first ever turban SIKH officer to graduate in over 100 years, right? So it was a huge milestone, and my mission from there on that I want to pave the path for future SIKH Canadian Forces soldiers especially the ones that are joining the officer corps through the Royal Military College of Canada. And I've just been on a representation, a diversity and inclusion journey ever since.
That's tremendous, and we're so pleased you received a lot of support along the way from your superiors in the Canadian Armed Forces. Similarly, here in the United Kingdom, the British Army are very supportive generally of the Sikh community from joining the armed forces, and we have a small number of Sikh officers at the senior levels as well, at least two majors in the British Army. But having said that, my own grandfathers were both soldiers in the British Army, and many of us have grandparents and beyond who were members of the armed forces. But that tradition hasn't continued, and the numbers of Sikhs in the British or the Canadian armed forces is quite small as to compare to other sectors of working life and career. Why is that?
So that's a really good question, and I've been trying to do a deep dive on this same topic. So we know we're the warrior spirit. We're there to defend, protect our fellow members of the society against anything unjust. So why do the recruitment numbers that we see in the Indian Armed Forces, why don't they translate over to the Western world? There's, I would say there's a few myths. Not necessarily myths. So I'll give you first example. When I go on recruitment drives here in Canada and I talk about, hey, at Gurdwaras, hey, this is what the Canadian Armed Forces do. We have a small footprint of Sikh community. The first question parents tell me is, I'm scared that my son is going to have to shave their beard, remove their turban to serve in a nation like Canada or America, or I've heard stories from the UK as well. So I try to educate them on that. I think we just got to do better publicity, better marketing in terms of no, those aren't necessarily true. But there's is a slight truth to it. So I'll give you a very quick example. So I face this. So when I joined the military, the gas masks that are issued to us, these are if we go in a chemical warfare environment, um, they only work if you have a clean shaved face. The Canadian Armed Forces realized that you can get waivers when you're trying to deploy. But I ran through that same scenario. I had to get a waiver when I deployed to Romania as part of a NATO air policing mission. But when I came back, I said, this is not okay. It doesn't make sense that six soldiers have to get waiver equipment not up to par. But Canada is a very inclusive society and a very advanced military corps. So they took that into consideration. They allocated resources, and now we're making new gas mask extensions to accommodate beards, turbans, hijabs. So the visible minority with religious symbols and religious identity, you can serve and not sacrifice faith to serve country overseas. So I was super proud of the Canadian forces.
That's a tremendous initiative. Perhaps when you have more information about that, you can share that with us. We'll be happy to pass it on to the Ministry of Defence, who do work closely with SIKH Channel. We have a number of serving British Army officers who are closely aligned to the SIKH Channel, and we'll be pleased to bring that development forward. Thank you very much. And in terms of your own family life, how do you balance your commitment to the armed forces? Because you just mentioned travel, there is international travel involved, there is danger involved. Thankfully, there aren't any very large scale conflicts, but there's a large war between Ukraine and Russia at the moment, and there's always a danger of being deployed. How do you deal with that and with your family life?
So I think the key to that question is be open with your family, be attached to your family, share what you can, share your experiences, and seek their support and understanding, right? I was blessed that we had some sort of military footprint within our family tree. My grandfather serving overseas and serving in the Indian Air Force. So when it came down to my mom accepting, "Hey, mom, I want to join the Canadian Armed Forces," it was more of a sense of pride by my mother and father rather than a sense of risk and danger. So family support is essential because without family and your ground zero level support, it's tough to do your day job. At the end of the day, it is a job, right? It could be a career. It could have been a career in the private industry on the IT side, but I chose to serve the Canadian Armed Forces, and without that family support, I don't think I would be where I am today.
And in terms of career development, what are your next steps forward? Are you becoming involved in training and bringing through new recruits? And it's a, is that something you're involved in?
Yeah, so my day-to-day jobs are very communications specific. Communications as in networks and IT assets, not necessarily from a public affairs point of view. So my day-to-day job is going to be in the field of cyber. I'm a project director for cyber projects for the Canadian Armed Forces right now, trying to get the Canadian Armed Forces, leaps and bounds when it comes to cyber warfare, and kind of pre-positioning us in the cyber domain so that if the adversary is trying to be active or acting against our IT assets and IT networks, we can defend them, take action as appropriate. So I think my journey is probably within the Canadian Armed Forces, and the Royal Canadian Air Force is probably going to be moving towards the cyber domain. But from a recruitment point of view, just because there's a sheer low number of serving members in the Canadian Armed Forces, I try to attend Nagar Kirtan and go to Gurdwaras and try to do recruitment drive just to actively encourage and advertise the career paths you can take, numerous career paths you can take within the Canadian Armed Forces.
And Sarabjot, you touched briefly upon cyber, and we've had a lot of recent developments in the field of AI, artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of talk about cyber warfare. We've seen it in action as well in Ukraine. I think the Ukrainian army have used it more effectively than the Russian army to disrupt drones and other forms of communication. And how important is cyber? But it's obviously important, but is it increasingly important? And will it eventually replace the human soldier? The human soldier seems to be becoming less and less important in any future war, and a future war may be decided in an electronic room.
So, excellent question. Do you see cyber, electronic warfare, space assets being leveraged in this new domain? Cyber is a contested domain. I don't think the traditional domains of land, air, and sea are ever going to be replaced, but cyber will complement them. It won't necessarily, in my personal view, be the only action we're going to take, whether it's trying to attain the cyber effects against the adversary or areas of interest or assets of interest, but it will complement the larger campaign plan and military planning on how do we use cyber to take action X, Y, and Z so that our Air Force can intervene and take over the mission. So it's always going to be a complementary role. I don't think it's going to replace human soldiers.
But does that mean that maybe smaller actors, smaller countries might have a larger role? We think of traditionally large, strong countries or empires with large armies of being very effective. At the moment, it's countries like China and obviously the United States of America and the Western powers. But smaller countries, will they be more influential because of this cyber capability?
Absolutely. So, when you look at the geopolitical realm, larger nations, the superpowers, they have their traditional military forces with cyber attached to them. The smaller nations don't have the budget or the ability to force generate such large human resources and air assets, land assets, and naval assets. So, yes, they're going to leverage cyber, and now they're going to become a threat depending on what type of activity they do. So, if from a bird's eye view, I would say the threat is increasing, more players will be involved, especially smaller nations. We would just have to take that to our mission analysis and critical thinking when we're doing war planning.
Obviously, we don't want war. All countries and fair-minded and right-thinking individuals will want to avoid conflict and war because it brings so much misery and happiness and suffering. And we've seen that in the past in human history. War is something to be avoided. It's a very negative part of the human nature and of our human history. And do you think it's important to have a strong defense, a strong army, for you to do a very good job in order to avoid war rather than be able to make war?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you should definitely have a military component to any nation, but it's what type of activities you are doing kind of defines you. This is what I'm so proud about with the Canadian Armed Forces. We don't actively seek conflict, but what we do is we uh, end up doing training missions for other NATO allies. So we would go overseas to, let's say, one of our NATO allies and train their troops on the Western tactics, techniques, and get them ready to fight the war or fight any conflict, should there be any. But you are right. In an ideal world, we want to all live happily, right? Content, um, be partners with our allies, and make sure something wrong doesn't go away in the future.
And has your Sikh faith helped you on your military career, the Sikh martial element to our religion and culture and our long history of military traditions going back hundreds of years? What influence has that played in your journey?
It's played a huge role. So I grew up to listening to stories from my grandfather, right? His time in the Indian Air Force, all his experiences. So I always had a sense of pride of, the Sikh warrior culture, and the parts my grandfather played during his time in the Indian Air Force. I take a sense of pride in our identity. I make it known, especially in the Canadian Armed Forces. I try to educate everyone what is a Sikh, where does the Sikh warrior culture come from, our history as part of the British Indian Army, our roles, Lions of the Great War, our roles in the World War I and World War II. So I try to do that education piece here in Canada and try to educate Canadian Armed Forces. So I take a deep sense of pride. I wear my turban with pride. It's part of our Canadian Forces dress standard. There's actually a chapter dedicated to Sikhs. So we're super proud of how inclusive and adaptive the Canadian Forces are.
That's tremendous. Thank you very much. Finally, any advice you want to offer, any mentoring hints or uh, things you'd like to say to anybody who wants to join the armed forces? What sort of person needs to apply? Are there any particular characters, elements, or skills that somebody should have if they want to be part of any armed forces?
Absolutely. So it doesn't matter which nation you're serving. It doesn't matter where you are. If you know, I joined the military because it was more of a higher calling, right? I wanted a job, but I wanted a sense of pride. And yes, you should be having a sense of pride in any job, but military is a different role. I would say, if you're an adventure hunter, you want to make your community proud, you want to continue on that warrior culture, no matter which nation's military you're joining, as a Sardar or as a Sikh, go to that recruitment center. They will shape you into a leader, no matter if it's the NCM Corps or the Officer Corps. Do your part in serving the country. Make the community proud, make the country proud, and make the Sikhs proud, right? Do extracurricular, if you're especially joining after high school, do extracurricular activities. Just be an active member of the society. This will make sure that by the time in any forces, you know what the higher calling is. You're going to wear the nation's flag, just like I wear the Canadian maple leaf, and you serve and protect those that are part of your society and nation. And it's just an absolute blessing when you see the end result and the cause that you're a part of.
That's tremendous. Thank you very much. Major Sarabjot Singh Anand, a role model for all Sikhs across the world, not just in Canada. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your career path with us. And please do keep in touch with SIKH Channel and keep us posted of developments with your career. We'd like to share those with our viewers. And we wish you well and Chardi Kala for the future and for your future endeavors.
Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.